LegalizeFreedom.com. Why are we here? Where do we come from? Where are we going? From the nature of reality to the future of humanity. Beyond politics, poverty, and war. LegalizeFreedom.com.
Greetings and welcome once again to LegalizeFreedom.com. I'm your host Greg Moffat, and my guest today is Tara-Jenelle Walsch, who joins us to discuss her book, Soul Courage. Have you ever thought about who you really are and why you're here? Most people share the understanding that life is about more than the experiences of the body and the mind, but it takes a special kind of courage to engage one's soul in our daily encounters. Knowing this is one thing, knowing how to do it is another. There are no schools offering courses in soul connection. There is, however, this book offering a clearly articulated path to such a connection with yourself and others. A path that has the potential to create some of the most enriching experiences in your life, allowing you to come alive in ways that can utterly transform your journey of self-awareness to one of soul awareness. The rewards can be extraordinary, forever changing the way you view yourself and the world.
Hello and welcome, Tara, and thank you so much for joining us today on LegalizeFreedom.com.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. All the way to England I am. So strange, yet exciting.
Now, of course, I immediately said I was going to address you as Tara-Jenelle, and I just called you Tara, but that's because, as I say, I want to be informal, so we'll stick with that. Today, we're going to be talking about your book, which has just come out, called Soul Courage. Before we dive into that, just tell listeners a little bit about your background and your work in general.
Well, I've had a greeting card company. I call it Celebrate Greeting Cards for the last 12 years. And I started that when I was in a very low point of my life, which is a story that I share briefly throughout the book, Soul Courage. But it led me to so many amazing things, this dark, deep place. And one of which was this greeting card company that I created. And I've been sharing my cards, which are different. They're not your standard greeting cards. They're in an authentic voice, and they speak really from the heart and soul, I believe, and lots of beautiful color. And I just learned how to do design and figured it all out somehow. I don't know how, and been running that business for the last 12 years, actually. Yeah, it's been great.
It occurs to me reading your book that the ideas that are in there, your way of seeing things, that also emerged from this phase in your life that you just referred to.
Yes, they did. Absolutely. I think a lot of people get to that low point in their life. Some people don't have a low point, but a lot of us go through ups and downs and then ultimately hit some kind of rock bottom for us. It's a different level for each person, I believe. But for me, it was pretty rock bottom, and it renewed me. It brought an entirely refreshing and new and raw way of looking and feeling and seeing the world. And that is how much of the second half of my life emerged from that. And I discussed that in the book, and I discuss some of the things that I discovered through that. The gems, the whole soul courage aspect.
Well, we'll come on shortly to how people deal with adversity in their lives, or conversely don't deal with it. But for now, let's just zoom out a little bit and think about the opening of your book. And you speak about some of the big questions, or the big questions, who we are, why we are here. And human beings have asked these questions and wondered about these things, well, since forever, as far as we can see. There certainly was a phase, I think, maybe in the last 200-300 years, maybe since the Industrial Revolution or the Scientific Revolution, which came along a little earlier, where these questions were maybe less asked by human beings or those people who were questing after these things. They became more of an underground movement. And it seems now that we're living in a phase, particularly since the dawn of the new millennium, when there seems to be a great hunger for meaning again in our lives. And these questions are being asked by individuals. And I'm not sure whether it's to do with how technology is affecting our lives or whether it's being spawned by some of the great challenges that many people in many different ways are facing around the world. Maybe it's a combination of both. So I don't know what you feel about that question, but it kind of feels that we're at quite a pivotal time.
It does. I agree, Greg. And I think it's exactly what you said with, might I add, I believe that we've evolved, that our society has through the years gotten to a different place where it's not just about the husband going to work every morning and coming back at 5 and the wife having dinner, on the table and him picking his check up, where we have more of a wider understanding and awareness of what we're doing here and who we are, or at very least we're curious. We've gotten to that place in our evolution, I believe, that at least a big handful of us are curious enough to tip it over into the normal folk.
Well, it seems, I mentioned there, I was alluding to challenges that many of us were facing. Now, there are many different types of societies on the earth, and some people are facing challenges that are very different to what you and I face. For example, you and I don't struggle, I'm assuming, to feed ourselves. At least we have somewhere warm and safe to sleep at night, and that cannot be said of every human being on the earth. However, if we're considering our particular situation, the industrialized nations and some of the emerging industrialized nations, one of the big things seems to be that technology, however wonderful many aspects of it are and how much it's advancing exponentially, that it hasn't delivered on some of the more human promises of what it was going to do to our lives and a meaning in our lives. And certainly the materialist fantasy that you alluded to of the house and the 2.6 kids and the 2 cars, job for life, mowing the lawn on a Sunday. That what was held up, for so many decades, particularly post-war in the US, held up as like, this is attainable by growing numbers of people. That seems to be going away. And for better or worse, that's definitely prodding a lot of people, I think, to question what exactly they're doing and where they're going.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. And thank goodness we're questioning it. I am ecstatic that we're questioning it. And I hope that we can find some peace in our belief what the answers are, because I know there's so many different ideas around what the answers are. So, but really ultimately all that matters is if we feel peace with it. So.
Well, one of the popular memes that I noticed going around on the internet in recent weeks was, you did not come here to pay bills and die. And I think that kind of sums up the points I was making just a moment ago. And I think for a lot of people, their imagination has been limited because for many of us, you and I are similar life trajectories in some ways, I suspect, in terms of what we were born into, in terms of expectations. So therefore, our thinking about what else we could do almost is non-existent, if not for us, for many other people. It's like you're being channeled down quite a narrow track. So I think some of the ideas that your book explores that came to you in your own time, some of which are actually quite eternal, but keep needing to be repeated. I think some of those are ways for people to start thinking differently about their situation that they find themselves in. And even though these different avenues have always been there, it's, we've been blinkered in many ways. And still are. I mean, if you turn on the mainstream media or, read the mainstream print media, it's still being shoved down our throats that, no, this is this limited number of ways you can do things. And no matter how bad things look right now, well, just wait to the next presidential election. Maybe things will get better after that.
Promises, right? Lots of promises.
Yeah, it's always been held off, isn't it? It's always just over the next horizon. I think that's part of what keeps people going sometimes.
Yes, and at some point we have to take responsibility for ourselves, and instead of searching for the answers out there, look within and find our own answers and listen to our soul, I like to say, but whatever you believe, listen to our own thoughts or our inner wisdom and find the answers and live through that.
I think this is where I think you used the phrase in the book in some form. I might be paraphrasing here, but intellect versus instinct, using that to step one degree on from what I've just been talking about in terms of what we think we understand, what we've been told versus what we might feel instinctively, if we allow ourselves to do that. And again, that's something we've been discouraged from doing. Is it's very much about the head and about calculating things rather than the heart or the gut or the intuition or whatever other form of words you want to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think intuition is a huge part of living. And I have a segment in that in the book about learning to live with our intuition. We've been kind of taught that some people haven't, some people don't, or you got to be special to really pick up on it or tap into it, and you got to be psychic or this or that. And what? Why are we putting it out there once again when it's right here within our reach?
The sense of separateness that a lot of us feel from others, I think we can extend, and I think, again, this is something you're getting at, almost to ourselves. Like there's two of us, at least two of each of us, and the person that quite often faces, the public-facing person, can that perhaps isn't the true us, can almost start to become, to our true selves, to be the real us, if you see what I mean. So it's almost like our true selves becomes the unreal one, the unreal aspect that we kind of deny, and that we get so used to wearing a mask so much of the time that we start to see that when we look in the mirror. We no longer even see behind that.
That's right. I agree. And in fact, that's what a large part of the premise of my book is about, having the courage to look at that and to feel into the difference and to start living from our true selves rather than hiding behind, or as you say, maybe we're not even aware that we're hiding behind or using a cloak or hindering or anything. Maybe we are thinking that's our own self. We've betrayed ourselves at such a high and deep level that we've convinced ourselves we're something else just to keep safe and protect ourselves and keep our head up and look good and keep moving forward. Because it's scary, really, sinking into the idea of who we might really be and what we might really feel.
When you were going through the phase in your life that was particularly challenging, the one that changed everything that you referred to, did you find value in being alone? I mean, you might initially have found that to be scary, being alone with yourself, alone with your thoughts, alone with introspection. It's something that that people do shy away from. In fact, I'd even use the word recoil because they're so not used to it. But ultimately, there can be great value there if, again, you can get back on terms with that other aspect of yourself, the true aspect of yourself. I mentioned looking into a mirror, and I've always said that if you can do that, like look in your own eyes in a mirror and be able to look into the darkest corner of your mind and still somehow be at peace with it, even if you want to change it, but just to say that is me and to not run away from it. I think that there's great value in that. So not even physically being alone necessarily, just being alone within your own psyche, within your own, in your own soul, honestly, to use your word.
Right. I absolutely agree. And it is so important. And as far as my experience of it, yes, that's how it all started at some level. I was put into the hospital, just to give the listeners a quickie. I had a huge eating disorder and severe depression, and I was put into the hospital, which stripped me of the ability to run to those things. Those were my resistance techniques. That's what I use. That's what I call them. And they're the things that I use to numb myself out or not have to face my feelings or face the world. And, pick a card, any card. Whatever the resistance technique for someone is may not be the same for another. For me, it was the withholding and using of food. For someone else, it may be drinking or a cigarette or gambling or overworking even, or something as simple as being online all the time. But that is the safe place to be, as you were referring to, the place where we can not have to be alone with ourselves, our true selves, hide in a sense, not have to feel our feelings. And when I was in the hospital, I was stripped of those resistance techniques. I didn't have that. And I was also structured and disciplined in a way that the people at the hospital told you to be alone and to do certain things. You had a lot of you time. Let me just put it that way. And it was almost as though, well, no one is forced to do anything, but I was primed. I was put in the position where to take a look at myself and to really feel into who I really was. That was the opportunity, and I took it. And I tell you, I agree with you. And I'm even going to take it a step further, even looking in the mirror and looking in our own eyes and trying to find our true selves. That's not even our true selves. I don't even believe our body is our true self. We're so deeply embedded past the physical, I believe. But yes, so often we walk around living almost a different identity. It's bizarre. And why? I believe because many of us don't have the courage or aren't activating the courage that we have. We're not courageous enough to really fully step into our true selves and live that.
Now that you've mentioned the word depression, I'm going to ask you about that. It's not something I've ever suffered from. I've known people who have, and obviously there's degrees of depression. There's different types. I don't pretend for a minute to understand it. If you're willing, and this is impossible to put into words, I'm sure, but how would you even attempt to characterize the depths of something like that versus the being outside of that, being finally escaping it?
It is hard to describe. And mostly because it's a feeling. It's something that can't quite be put into words, but I'll try. There's a very deep feeling of despair. And for me, I'll just speak for myself, a feeling that there's a feeling of why bother? That's how low the despair goes. What's it all about? What's the point? Why am I here? I don't understand. I'm confused. I feel swallowed up and overwhelmed by life, and I just don't understand the purpose, not necessarily my purpose in life, that too, probably, but also the purpose of human life. It's a place that, for me, can be so introspective when you do tap in so much and so deeply into who you are and your feelings that you feel as though you've created your own world in there. And you are scared to then be into the regular world. It's just safer. It's very hard to explain.
In some ways, it sounds like a microcosm of our times. In some ways, when you mention wondering about purpose and meaning and taking that up even to the level of the whole species and the whole planet, and in terms of purpose, I think we are suffering in great swathes of the world from tremendous nihilism. And I think out of that, if there is anything positive, is the kind of questing yearning that I mentioned earlier, that people are sort of rejecting that and saying, is there meaning here? And also coming to understanding that you can make your own meaning, and maybe that's the point. So, it just sounds like what you experience kind of writ large. It's a big part of our culture, really. Again, talking mainly in the West now, which is that meaning has been stripped out of life, as I say, over the past several centuries, to a point where I think that this crisis that we're experiencing, whether it's personal, organizations, groups, or nations even, that it was kind of inevitable in a way. So it's like birth pains of something new. I think maybe you could characterize this phase as.
Absolutely. And that's the beautiful part. That's the beautiful part, that we're birthing into a new awareness around why it is that we're even here in a physical body and what we're all doing here. And we're giving ourselves reason and purpose to the point, hopefully, that our personal growth increases and we feel a sense of connection with others, and we don't feel alone anymore. And we understand and see and create our world in a new way, in a way that we feel like we're co-creating with others. We're collaborative versus we're just on our own. That's what I believe.
Well, of course, we do conform to our prevailing culture, whatever that happens to be. And I think we both, and a lot of people listening to this, will recognize being brought up in a culture, even if you had a warm and loving family and a good upbringing, that the prevailing culture out there, as it were, is one of controlling your emotions and feelings to the point of suppressing them. Some are appropriate to express, some are not. Now, that's a kind of cultural judgment, not actually what might be good for the individual. We can imagine how we wouldn't want ourselves necessarily to have no control whatsoever over our expression of anything. I think some people do. I'd have to use the word suffer with that because it compromises their lives and makes their lives difficult when they can't behave in an appropriate way. But it's a grey area, isn't it? Deciding what's appropriate and what's not appropriate in terms of emotions and expressing your feelings. And I think that we have rather too many things shut off and shut down from appropriate expression, and that leads in itself, as you know all too well, to tremendous problems.
Well, yeah, and I believe it's a gray area because of what you said, because that it has been restricted for so long in so many societies or generations, especially so, because we've been taught that to be strong and that you must appear confident, that you must hide your feelings, and that you must be stoic, and that we've been taught that this is respectable and admirable. And now we're evolving, I believe, at such a level that there's no way we can not feel through the process of our evolution as a group and our personal evolution. So we're feeling, and then we're bumping into the old ways. Oh, not supposed to do that, but then it sure feels good to feel. And then we notice that we're connecting more when we feel and we express our feelings with others. Wow, this is amazing. How could I feel so much more connected with life, with myself, and with other people by expressing these feelings? What have we been missing out on all these years? And so, as you say, it seems to be a gray area because it now seems like a new great thing, and some people take it too far. And, well, I don't know if there's such thing as taking it too far, but they wear their heart on their sleeve, and they're living in their emotional world, and they're living and walking and expressing emotions and feelings, which there is that can be a put off to a lot of people. So there is somewhat of a balance that needs to be found and created. But I think we're finding it. And I think the more that we put out there that it's a positive thing, that this is a gift, and that this is achievable, and that this will enhance and enrich your life, then the more people will get on board and open up and take their masks and cloaks off and start to feel and start to express and feel the wonderful, enriching connections that they have with others.
Well, I think that feelings and emotions, these are happening for a reason. Sometimes people feel that they're irrational or that they've, quote unquote, come from nowhere and they don't understand them. But they're feedback, I think, on what we're doing and how we're living. They're trying to tell us something. And that's good as well as bad or indifferent, right across the spectrum. And I think that we don't have to, we're not trying to advocate any particular model of expression of what you really feel and what you really think about any given situation. Each case on its merits, each to their own. The point is, I think, of getting, as you mentioned the word balance, but getting a balance for yourself that feels right so that you don't feel pent up and frustrated and not listened to and not heard and to not have any outlet for this stuff. And for some people, that they may be entirely content and fulfilled and feel listened to and feel able to express themselves with what another person might look on as quite restrained. But if that person's in that space that is right for them, so be it. Someone else may be much more prone to hysterical laughter and breaking down in tears with emotion at what somebody else might say was the slightest thing. So it's, we're all different. So it's not trying to we're not trying to get into some sort of cliche here where, I've certainly seen workshops and things like that where people are being encouraged to scream at the top of their lungs whether they want to or not, because this must be a good thing,
I agree. I agree with you. And I think that a lot of the difficulty comes around people not identifying their feelings. It's kind of a little bit of a new thing. Oh, we're allowed to feel now, in this generation or last generation, or I'm not sure when it all kind of started, coming out of the holes, but now it's not a hush-hush society as it used to be in the 40s and the 30s that we were discussing about everyone mowing their lawn on Sundays, and everything was just so hush. The only feelings that were shared were behind closed doors, if that. But people nowadays, I think, don't give themselves time to identify their feelings. It's so new to them that it just comes out, and it a lot of times just blurts out, and a lot of times it's just a reaction, not a response, let alone an expression, a loving expression of your feelings. So we don't know what to do with a lot of our feelings because we haven't possibly, my theory, is given ourselves the time for inner reflection and the self-love to identify what it is we're feeling. And one thing that I discuss, one thing that helped me to activate my soul courage is what I call the sacred formula in my book, and that is feel, express, connect, as I've been discussing. But the first part, feel, a lot easier to do when we give ourselves time to do so, preferably alone, but we can have it without being alone, but preferably alone, time to do so and have that inner reflection. I call it solitude. And to take this sort of solitude and identify, what is it that I'm feeling? Am I angry? Am I just confused? Am I hurt? A lot of times we think initially we're angry, and then we take some time to, quote, process or take some solitude, whether that's just taking a walk or sitting out on the back deck with a cup of tea, or just laying in bed and just allowing ourselves to feel what we're feeling and trying to wrap our head around it. But then we walk away with it, understanding ourselves more and really getting, oh, this is what I'm feeling. Now I can express it because I understand it. I've identified it. So that, I think, is helpful. Instead of all the different levels and all the different craziness, I think that will really not only benefit each person, but bring more closeness and more connection to people.
I mentioned the cliched idea of a sort of a new agey workshop where people are being prompted to do things maybe that they don't want to do, but we're not talking about something that's remote from everyday experience here. I find that people have been so unused to thinking about these things really honestly and looking within themselves that they've tended to see it as something that is in the mind, body, spirit section of the bookshop, and it's not really for them and they're not into that. But this is for everybody every day. And if people are feeling entirely grounded and balanced in their lives, wonderful. That if that's genuinely the case, that's what we need more of. But I talk to people all the time, and I like the example you use in the book about talking to cash clerks in stores. And I talk to people in that sort of context all the time. I know there's similar things, and even just giving people 60 seconds of your time in a complete stranger in an everyday situation, it's amazing sometimes how warmly they respond to that, because people quite often, when they seek therapy, psychotherapy, at the end of the day, what they're looking for is someone to actually listen to them without judgment, for them to be able to speak quite often without any response. You know, they could perhaps sit in a room, as we mentioned earlier, on their own and talk to themselves, but they might feel that they're going insane if they do that. And maybe they can't talk to their significant other or members of their family because it comes with the baggage. But sometimes in that stranger situation, whether it is a psychiatrist or whether it's just somebody that you're having an interchange with on a day-to-day basis, for people to be listened to, I find, is remarkably unusual in a lot of people's lives.
I agree. You're absolutely right. And not even just listen to. I believe that people just want to be seen. And not in the sense of physically seeing someone, but to be seen like, I'm here. I make a difference. And that's why when we stop and speak to the cashier or to the lady on the side of the road or to anyone, a stranger or to people that we know, when we take the time to be present in life and look people in the eyes and see them, that's where the gift is. That is why so often people they get a lift, because then they see themselves. It's all a mirror. We see them, we see ourselves, they see their self through us. It's like this big, beautiful circle. And not only do they feel seen, but they don't feel as alone anymore. You ever do that when, after you talk to a couple strangers, you go back to your car and you go, wow, I feel a sense of oneness, without sounding so spiritual, taking the risk of sounding trite and new agey, as you say, but I do. And that isn't new agey. That's real life. There's massive amounts of people, human beings on this earth. We're all souls. We're all souls wanting to connect and be seen. So absolutely, it's just so important.
Yeah, I think you can, as you say, it's one thing to talk to a random stranger and find out a little bit about them, or as you say, just connect with them even on again, not to sound new agey, but on an energetic level, just to do more than take their money or give them your money or whatever it happens to be, that both parties gain from that. And it really is a mutually beneficial thing to be doing. And I think we sometimes move through day-to-day life trying to minimize those interactions. I've spoken to a lot of people and they're kind of like hell as other people, and that, similar expressions. And I think if you shift your perspective, then everything changes. And even the grumpiest person that you might come across in a day-to-day situation, they're have more in common with you than you might care to realize. And, you've got nothing to lose by being open, with them and to them, so to speak.
Absolutely. And everything is an energetic exchange. Everything is an energetic exchange. Every time we see someone and we smile, or we don't, we choose to turn away, that's exchanging a different kind of energy. That's pushing them away. So everything is, and that's just the truth. Life is energy. And that's not spiritual. That's the truth. And those who don't want, I believe that's the truth. I'm just going to say it right there, loud and clear, that it is. That everything is energy. And that the mere smallest token or action or leaning towards or appreciating or seeing someone else can refuel that in another. And it all just goes round like a circle. It's amazing.
Cutting edge science in the quantum realm has been telling us for a long time, and increasingly so, about the interconnection of everything. And for a lot of people, that's become a bit of a trite cliche. All is one. Yeah. But actually, if you take time to look at it, that this is the case, and we have no reason to suspect, as some people maintain, that the quantum world does not somehow affect the macro world that you and I live in our day to day. It's all made of the same stuff. So without going into a long scientific extrapolation, there is evidence for this idea that you mentioned of energetic connection. And the more you look for evidence of this, the more you'll find it. Now, it's difficult to quantify and measure in what we currently conventional scientific terms, but there's gathering evidence for it. And when you bring together these ideas about interconnection and about oneness and about our reality, even this, as I say, the macro 3D reality being a field of energy, a lot of this comes into a whole different context, and you really can bring some of these ideas that some people find a bit woolly about interconnection and start to just see evidence for it in your own life. The more you look for it, the more you see it, is my experience.
Right, and the more present you are, the more you see it. The people that don't feel it or see it or have it even in their world are those who are still living in the going to work 8 to 5 and not taking those moments of presence and awareness to feel and just slow down and listen to themselves and look at others and everything that we've been discussing. If they did, then they would undoubtedly feel the energy of another.
We sometimes think back to childhood, or we perhaps look at a child, maybe our own, maybe someone else's, and we see that exuberance, joy for life that they have. And that can take a number of forms, very often, as I say, full of joy and full of goodness and full of just an innocent acceptance of the world how it is. Sometimes it means that child falls over and just immediately starts bawling at the top of its lungs without, in a purely reactionary sort of way. But at some point that gets ground out of us. And again, as I said earlier, there are ways that we want to exercise some degree of control over what we feel and what we express without suppressing anything, but just to be the observer also of our feelings and how we express them. We can look upon individuals in society, for example, like a schizophrenic or someone with severe autism. Some scientific evidence would suggest that they're in some way actually, hyper gifted, but it's also has compromised their expression within the type of societies we have.
Well, what I think you're saying is that we seem to have lost that innocent, joyful bliss that we all have when we're children, when we're babies, indeed, for sure. But then even in our childhood, that curiosity and that also that freedom to just cry, that freedom to just laugh and to giggle and to look at people without being, in our heads. We're not really in our heads when we're little. We're not in our minds. That's it. When we're babies and when we're children. And we haven't been told what's right and wrong, quote unquote, according to the older generation, the people that are raising us, the society ahead of us that has constructed such rigidality. Is that a word? But
I think rigidity. I think
rigidity. So yes, we lost that beautiful bliss, and it's still there though. It's there to be found and felt and expressed, I believe.
Well, I've spoken already about psychoanalysis and therapy, and there's certainly a profusion of offerings, shall we say, courses, books, practitioners, setting themselves up. As I say, whether that's to counsel individuals, couples, groups, or organizations. I mean, that's one of the big trends at the minute is, getting sort of your corporation will hire in someone to come and do this sort of, pop psych stuff with your employees. Some of that seems to be quite superficial and opportunistic. And I think perhaps we shouldn't be surprised. That's the way, a lot of businesses operate. They'll see an emerging trend in the market and they'll try and replicate it. But underlying that is, I think, what I spoke about earlier, which is this genuine craving for something else, even if it's not well understood what that is. The boss who hires in a psychotherapist to come and speak to his employees, for example, or do some workshops may have no real idea what this is all about, but he's looked at a trend somewhere, he's talked to someone else about it, and there just seems to be something that's happening that people at different levels think that, they want to take advantage of. Now, whether, how much of it is authentic, I don't know, but I think that situation will increasingly improve as time moves on.
I believe it is authentic. I believe, I actually, yes, it's a trend, but I believe what bad can come from it? Nothing. Only good can come from it. Only goodness, only people cracking wide open, only people relaxing and appreciating each other more and bringing more awareness to their interactions at work. I quite frankly think it's great that we do that. And what are we looking for? I believe we're looking for ourselves, especially when we go to work. We put a different hat on, if you will. And we have our walls around us of protection. So anything that can loosen that up or bring us more in touch with who we really are and appreciate each other and take the time to notice and respect and all that jazz, I'm all for it.
Now, you just mentioned a work hat, wearing a different hat at work, and I think a lot of people will recognize that. They may even die a little inside when they set off for work with their hat on the parcel shelf in the back of their car, ready to put it on for
Right.
work. Now, this is something that I have never done. I've not really, on a personal note, I've not worked in a lot of conventional work situations, but I've always just kind of what you see is what you get. And that can get you into a lot of trouble. If not with your own self, you may feel, well, I haven't done anything wrong. It's just me. But people are so used to having buttoned down, controlled situations in most work contexts, a lot of convention. I'm thinking now of your dry office environment, where everything's a bit stiff and there's protocols and rules and nobody can even remember why they were ever written in the first place. But, and, the outlet for that is, we'll have wacky tie day or something like that. Or,
Right. Casual day, or right, exactly.
Yeah, it's not really the outlet that people are looking for.
Right. Let's be ourself day every day. That would be great.
Imagine how things would be transformed. I'm thinking now of everything from corporate life to political life to our economics to all these areas of society that can be so dysfunctional and have such devastating impacts on individuals and communities and countries. And in some ways we see now the whole world, how those would be transformed if they were based in the sort of the feeling and expression that we're talking about. If they were at the human level that actually the rest of us, the rest of the time, are all on anyway, if you see what I mean.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I was just like you at all my jobs. And of course, now since I work for myself, I can do whatever I want. And you know what? I was one of the most loved people at my jobs. People loved it. Yeah, every now and then I got in trouble because I wasn't being as serious as I was supposed to or so forth. But it's something that I think everyone wants. It's a freedom that when they see you in it, they go, she's being herself. Wow. And they can see the freedom. They can feel it from you. And they want that too. And that's one of the beautiful effects of living courageously enough to be your true self and to not have masks and cloaks and walls around you. That's one of the beauties of it. One of the many.
We take things so seriously sometimes. And, there are some things in life that is a serious business, but so many of the things that we elevate to this deadly, oh my God, this is just pay attention, don't smile, don't even flinch. This is serious. It's just ridiculous. I mean, one of my pet hates is the popularity these days of celebrity chefs and cookery shows. And I will just say that one of the indicators, one of my guests said one of the reasons you're nearing the end of empire is when chefs get elevated to celebrity status. He said this happened in ancient Rome, apparently. Cooks were held up as just like superstars, and that was a surefire indicator that the end was nigh. So perhaps we're experiencing that now. But I watch some of these shows, and it's just because I'm interested in cooking and food, and there's these guys having absolute meltdowns in kitchens and screaming their heads off at employees, and everyone, people are in tears, and there's food being thrown at the walls, and guests are having tantrums, and I'm thinking, it's just a bit of dinner, guys.
I know. Well, a lot of that's probably just drama for ratings, TV ratings. But yes, you're right. People are, why do we take ourselves so seriously? There's a time and a place for it when we have to submit our taxes and do all the responsible things, for sure. But in life, we can still be responsible and just be relaxed and enjoy ourselves and laugh a little and bring out the best in each other. I agree. Absolutely.
To use the cooking analogy again, but in terms of how you approach a task, whether it's work or leisure or, your relationships, whatever it happens to be, but what the energy you put into it and where you're coming from when you're doing that thing affects the outcome. So what I'm saying is here, I would like to think that any food I ate made by someone else would at least be made with care, if not with love, if you say what I mean. So I think that these approaches that are taken sometimes in, whether it is in the corporate sphere or politics or whatever, they can come from a place that's, well, maybe not particularly positive, but I think you can definitely get into energies being put into things that are ultimately destructive because of what's, where they're coming from from certain individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about that all the time, probably too much. But even food, for sure. Something like food. Do you remember that movie, like Water for Chocolate, where she was so loving and all her food was just so delicious? It was about all the energy that she put into it, and she was just such a loving, same thing that you're discussing. And so that carries on, for sure, past food, into our actions, into our creations of any sort, whether it's art or whether it's a term paper or whether it's, you name it, whatever we're working on. It's carrying our energy and putting it out there in the world. So wouldn't we want to put some amazing energy out there versus serious and power oriented and all that kind of energy? I don't know.
Another trend I've noticed, which is it's been on the increase for quite some time. It's definitely worrying. I hope that with some of the developments that we're speaking about develop and continue, that we can see the situation being addressed. And what I'm referring to here is the tendency to take individuals, this is particularly bad in America, it seems to me, who are feeling discombobulated, disturbed, unhappy, unsatisfied, whatever it happens to be, and they're prescribing them antidepressants, psychotropics, and in terms of your book, these people will quite end up feeling nothing. This is somehow supposed to be preferable to feeling, even if it's bad, because as I said earlier, these feelings are trying to tell you something. You can sit on them with maybe antidepressants, but for how long? I don't think that's something that people want to be doing for decades or all their life.
No, and just to be clear, I don't say anywhere in my book that antidepressants are wrong. I think there is a time and a place for them, and there are a lot of people that are chemically imbalanced and that have deep depression or some type of I don't even want to say disorder, but some complications that are authentically severe for them, and to the point where they can't move through life. And absolutely, I believe if it's helpful, then sometimes it can actually help someone to feel. I think when you're depressed, I'll just speak from my own personal experience, you get so in the world of feeling that you're swimming in it that you can't feel a lot of regular things. And it's a lift, because I was on antidepressants when they finally put me on it when I was in the hospital. And it does lift you. But it doesn't lift you to a place where you feel numb. It doesn't lift you to a place where you feel high or not yourself or like there's a cloak on you. It just brings you to a clarity around things. It slows things down. It's hard to explain. But I never once felt that I was numbing out when taking those. So I respectfully disagree at that level. However, I will agree with you in that it's becoming like candy. And the general practitioners, my goodness, that aren't even psychiatrists can, prescribe it to people. Someone just comes in and says, I haven't been feeling great lately. We'll try these. That part, I agree, is a little ridiculous and out of hand, and we shouldn't abuse it. But for those who need it, it can be very helpful. Okay, yeah, no,
actually, I completely agree with you. 'Cause, I have spoken to people who've had the experience that you describe, that you had. I guess if I was putting it in a little more nuanced fashion, then I would have identified, I was thinking really of the fact that it is a grey area, and at some stage it does become inappropriate, and it's been too easy for too long for practitioners, as you say, just to treat it like candy, and it shouldn't be treated that way at all. This is something it's not just meant to be like getting a bottle of booze at the weekend. It's something that should be treated with respect and be a very, very considered decision in my experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
So do you have any theories about if our natural state is the one that we would gravitate back towards, that centered, balanced state, if that is natural for us, and kind of what happened? Is it a cyclical thing? Because people have talked about, right back to the Garden of Eden idea, that the fable, the myth, the allegory, whatever you want to call it, that there was something that happened to mankind. Did the roots lie in what I was discussing, a few hundred years ago, where materialist, mechanistic, exclusively scientific thought began to drive out the spiritual in our lives? I don't know what over the years, if you've mused on these topics, what you're feeling you've come away with, or whether you've never really been able to pin it down to anything.
I haven't been able to pin it down either. I think that you're on it, though. I think that it's a collaborative combination of materialism getting out of control, and celebrity, and status, and power, and things that don't matter starting to be raised up to the same priority level as some of the values that we were once raised with. And it's starting to get more attention at the very least, if not being brought to the same level, and distracting us. I think we're just outright distracted, which makes it harder to find ourselves. I hate to say find ourselves, but to get back, to really live from that place of divine authenticity and truth. Because we're stuck in, comparing ourselves and wanting and, desires and endless, jealousy and just bizarre things. So we get distracted, I believe. And it takes us away from our core values.
You mentioned the word distraction there, and you list a number of them in the book. And one that is a particular area of interest for me, I've done a couple of shows on this, and that's technology and alienation, in terms of, like, you and I are speaking now across the World Wide Web. This is a wonderful thing. Technology has brought so many benefits, and I think our global communications now are one of the great ones. The internet has helped to facilitate so many of the positive trends that you're speaking about. But at the same time, it has also been an avenue, a blind alley, a cul-de-sac for people to disappear down when they're looking to get away from themselves, to hide from whatever it is that's going on inside. So this has been it's a tremendous kind of double-edged sword, I think. And of course, the technology is advancing exponentially at pace. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the developments are going to be on both sides of this argument going forward.
Yeah, you're right. It is a double-edged sword because, no one can deny that the advance in technology has, I don't want to even say improved, but just, brought so much to the world. It's unbelievable. And the truth is, notice that we did without it. So much of it is convenience and efficiency and things that help us go faster and stronger and, that kind of thing. But years ago, when we just had the newspaper and we just had a landline that we had to come home to and check our messages, or even before there was a message recorder. But when we had all the good old things, the news at night and a newspaper, that was the only way that we could figure it out, or calling someone on the telephone to see how they were. That still worked. So much of it is convenience, and it gets back to the old balance thing. Everything within balance. Yes, it's amazing. Yes, Facebook is amazing. It's brought so many people together and connected even new people, but like anything, it can be abused, and people rely on it, and they live through it, and they can become isolated and then not want to go out anymore and be part of the real world. So it is dangerous. Dangerous seems a little dramatic, but it is, as far as humanity goes, and as far as a person seeing a person and hugging a person and talking face to face. It is dangerous.
Yeah, well, you spoke there about actually physically meeting people, physically being with people, and that's one of the implications of a lot of this communications technology, is it has, in some cases, kind of unwittingly discouraged that. Those of us of a certain age, we remember a time when, I can almost remember, I think, when I was a child, the first telephone arriving in the house. And we moved through technological developments that for a long time were just slight tweaks on what had already gone before. A telephone was a telephone was a telephone, and that was about it. But since the advent of the internet, early 90s, but for most people, probably into the new millennium before they started to have this technology at home, and then, smartphones coming along in the last decade, that has resulted in a lot of younger people growing up not knowing anything else. And I'm always reading articles about the disconnect here. It makes such a difference to engage with other human beings on a one-to-one basis. Whether it's the shared energy we spoke about earlier that you get in a group, or whether it's just looking someone else in the face, being right next to them, and how your communication changes. And I think that we do have this ongoing challenge, really, to get, as I say, particularly generation, and there'll be more generations coming along that only know this general mode of communication. It'll be a great challenge to encourage them to see that there's not just this one way of doing things.
Well, what I find that we should focus on, I find it somewhat alarming that this generation is growing up with such high technology that not only are they losing a lot of the values that you and I were raised with, people to people, hugs, talking, sitting down at the kitchen table and having a cup of coffee together, those type of innocent and simple things. but it feels as though that they aren't even equipped with the ability to personally be with one another and to express themselves verbally, their true feelings, any feelings of compassion or vulnerability, that even when they do express themselves, it's almost as though it's exaggerated or hyper expressed. Like, I don't know if you've been around children lately, but there's always a joke or there's always a put down or something. So, golly, I believe that the younger generation needs our help. And that if we pay close attention, we'll see that all it really takes is being with them, leading by example, showing them through human form, grabbing their hand or giving them a hug or earnestly listening to them when they're explaining or expressing their problems or their doubts or their insecurities, if they actually do. And if they don't, engaging with them in a way that allows them to, that invites them to, and telling them verbally the value of connection, sharing with them the value of human connection. I think that's so important. And that's one thing that we can all do at this age to help the next generation.
You used the expression there, hyper expressed, and I think that's very appropriate in this context. I've noticed with younger people, particularly teenagers, that there has to be a drama, and that it's almost like they're learning, or I don't know where they're getting their model for what appropriate behavior is. I suspect that it's on reality TV shows or a lot of these celebrity TV shows that are basically taking nobodies and turning them into celebrities just by dint of the fact that they're on TV. And everything there is very black and white, and it is hyper expressed. The slightest thing is a cause for a blow up in emotion, whether it's happiness, whether it's sadness, everything is pushed to an extreme, and there is almost no downtime. There's nothing in between, if you see what I mean. And this, right. I also notice infantilization, whereas we talked earlier about little kids and about their exuberance and how they see the world. And I see teenagers moving in even to their 20s, and I've come across people even in their 30s now, literally big teenagers, and their emotional intelligence is almost non-existent, to the point where they struggle with personal relationships, particularly with intimate relationships. They just don't seem to be equipped. They just don't seem to have developed in the way that human beings normally would, moving through successes, failures, mistakes, learning as you go through life. And it's a process, but that's, for a lot of young people, that seems to be not happening.
Right. Well, and you hit it nail right on the head. The downtime is intimacy. And I'm not talking about sexual intimacy, obviously. I just mean any downtime with anyone, whether it's your parents, your friends, where you're not going, what's up? And like putting on your little, fake act or hyper expression mode. If you're being just real and down to earth, it's too intimate for this generation, I'm noticing. A lot of them. Even when they're alone, it's too intimate to be alone. Then they have to think and feel and go through all those scary feelings. So I agree, and they'll just grow up like that. That is why it's almost, I don't want to say our responsibility, because it's an option, it's an opportunity more than anything. But anyone that's passionate about wanting to extend the value of human connection and humanity in general, just feeling our feelings and feeling together in the world, and to end this isolating, strange new way of being. Anyone that's interested in that, it's easy enough to, well, not easy enough, but we all can play a part in making a difference.
Picking up the general theme, one of the core themes in your book, not being in touch with feelings, with emotions, and being able to express yourself and feel seen, to use your expression, or listened to, however you want to put it. This can have very real effects in people's lives beyond some of the ones you've already discussed. I'm thinking now of actual physical manifestations. I'm thinking of disease. And although, again, it's not often spoken about, the link between your emotional, your psychological well-being and your physical well-being is well established. if, as I say, not often discussed in the mainstream. And quite often this will be the first sign that people have been suppressing emotional things within themselves, is that their body breaks down at some level. It rebels.
Right. We can't keep it in the body because, like we said earlier, it's energy. Emotions are energy in motion. And if we suppress them and keep them inside and don't let them out through expression, then they're just stuffing everything inside. They're twirling around and whirling around inside of us, which is bound to create a physiological reaction within us. That's why it's so important to express them, even if we just express them to ourselves.
You talk in the book about energy matching versus, authentic feelings, being in touch with those. And I think that's something just worth mentioning briefly, because I think that I've seen a lot of energy matching going on, most of it actually having a negative outcome. And a lot of people think that that's achieving balance, but it's not particularly, and especially, again, thinking earlier of what I was saying about political and corporate spheres, when you get energy matching on a large scale, that can be very destructive.
Right, but even on a small scale. And, to be fair, I believe energy matching is just spawned from the desire for harmony. Everyone wants things to be in harmony, and everyone wants approval. And that is probably what, that's probably what makes us energy match, because we all want to be approved of, because we have this idea that through approval we'll find connection. If someone approves of me or thinks that I'm cool or likes what I'm up to, then they're going to want to be my friend. They're going to want to see more of me. They're going to want to connect with me. And I want to feel that. But without knowing any of this, of course, I believe this is all subconscious. So the best way to do it is to be like them or match their energy. I don't believe the best way to do it is, but that's what I think that we're thinking subconsciously when we do this. When you see kids doing it, especially, but grown adults, and as you said, in big corporations and everything, the awareness needs to be brought around that as well.
Just a closing thought, Tara. It's trying to bring some of this together, getting in touch with your feelings, your soul, what you actually feel, what these emotions are trying to tell you. You begin to get an increasing sense of perspective if you can do some of this work in terms of what's important in life. And that really changes everything. I mean, too often people find themselves, at the end of their life, particularly if, you have the opportunity to see it coming, if you see what I mean, as opposed to, a sudden end. And it's terrible to see people racked with a sense of regret about what they didn't do, didn't say, because they didn't allow themselves to feel and express what was really in there. One of the consequences of this can be that things go out of your life, people, places, ways of doing things. And a lot of people, I think, fear letting go of things that they've come to identify with. But in my experience, a lot of the letting go can be an allowing in. Ultimately, it can be a difficult thing to move through that phase, that process. But it's always worth it. Whatever the costs, benefits appear to be when you're in the depths of all that, it's worth trying to, look within yourself with clarity and to put what you think other people expect of you, whether it's family, friends, society, whatever it happens to be, work, to put that to one side, possibly for good.
Absolutely. That was beautifully said. I wholeheartedly agree. There can be no bad outcome from going within. It's only goodness. And at the very, very, very least, which actually doesn't make sense, I was going to say, you find a deeper connection with yourself. But I believe that energetically, if you're connecting with yourself in a more full way, then you invariably are connecting with other people on a deeper level. So it's just, I'm just so pro feel. I'm so pro express. I feel that that's where it's at. And I'm so pro let's be courageous. Let's do it all together. If we're all doing it, then we can all support each other, and we can all know what to expect.
That's the big lie, isn't it? That everybody else, apart from us, has got it all worked out and they know what we're doing. We know what they're doing, rather. And that if anyone's got it wrong, it's us. And actually, when you start to do these things that you're describing, you realise that there's so many other people just feeling the same stuff and they just want to get it out and they want to let go of all the crap as well. But so many people are pretending.
Yes. And they're scared to be vulnerable. And being vulnerable is an amazing thing. It's actually such a freedom. It is beautiful. And the more vulnerable we are, the more vulnerable others feel that they can be around us and around other people. Therefore, then they lose that mask of having to look like they have it all figured out. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, Tara, today we've been talking, amongst other things, about some of the ideas in your book, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, Soul Courage. That's widely available, but tell folks a bit about that if you wish to. Share your website. As you mentioned earlier, you've got your greeting cards business, and there's other resources on your website too. So put that out there, and anything else you'd like to share.
Soul Courage is about what we've been discussing. It's about that place inside all of us that is deeply loyal to who we are. The place that sometimes feels scary and freeing at the same time. And when we trust this place enough to live from it, we come alive from the freedom that it gives us to bring all of who we are to our life and to share it openly with others. All of it, our joys and our pains, our wonders and our vulnerabilities, our excitements and our fears. And we begin living from such a pure level of truth that we dare to be and own all of ourselves without any more hiding or hindering or cloaking or masking. It's as though we're unveiling our true selves. And that's basically what the book is about. And it's about inspiring you to activate your courageousness and to get on board with that and feel the sense of freedom that comes from that. And my website is soulcourage.com. I'd love if you came by and stopped by for a visit. I also have on there my Celebrate greeting cards. Lots of a large array of cards for all kinds of different things. So thank you so much for having me, and thank you for listening.
Oh, well, thank you, Tara, for joining us today on LegalizeFreedom.com.
Well, folks, that's it for another week. As ever, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, check out the website, which is LegalizeFreedom.com. That's legalize-freedom.com, where you'll find an archive of programs offering alternative views on a wide range of topics including politics and economics, energy and environment, culture, spirituality, history, and the nature of reality. You can also browse and buy a range of publications from our guests, and if you're feeling generous, make a donation to help keep the site up and running. Whether you listen, donate, or do both, I greatly appreciate your support. Until next time, I'm Greg Moffat, and you've been listening to LegalizeFreedom.com.